Are you dismissing the violence in the north of Nigeria, especially as recounted by the victims themselves?
So I am not dismissing the violence. I acknowledge that there's a sectarian violence, but I think there's a massive difference. I think trying to peddle or trying to push the genocide narrative is more damaging to religious relations in Nigeria. And I think this platform is a very good opportunity for me to do this distinction. Yeah.
To the question of where they get the AK-47s from, you say those who say that they are being sponsored by some members of government are peddling conspiracy theories, but you do not advance any point. Why do you call their views conspiracy theories? Why do you do not have an answer to the question?
No, my answer to the question is they use proceeds from kidnappings.
And why do you think your own view is not a conspiracy theory, but the other view is a conspiracy theory?
The Beyond Africa podcast. Welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast, the only platform where experts share their views on African issues. Ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Galin Bernard. At the Beyond Africa podcast, we share African stories that change lives. Today, again, we are going to Nigeria, where we are discussing the violence by Boko Haram and other Islamist extremist groups. President Trump recently designated Nigeria a country of particular concern on the grounds that Christians are being persecuted by the Islamists. Some advocates have advocated that the violence by the Islamic terrorists be categorized as Christian genocide. Further to this, President Trump, with the collaboration of the US Congress, delegated a delegation to go see for themselves what was on the ground. They returned, they gave their finalizing their report. Whatever that report is going to look like, we shall see it in the near future. Today, we are receiving someone who is going to explain to us what he understands by this conflict, what he gets as the understanding and the foundations and the motivations guiding those who are doing or executing the killings, the burnings, and the terrorist acts in the north of Nigeria. He's going to share with us from his research, from his writings, and from his public presentations, so he is no stranger to what we are going to talk about today. Dr. Femi Owolade, you are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me, Dr. Ngalin Bernard. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this platform, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thank you once again for having me.
Thank you so much. Those of us who host podcasts, we don't want to be called doctor on air. We can reserve that for other fora.
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
I think the salutation is quite important because there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. But yes, we can reserve that for another occasion.
Thank you so much. So you're a postdoctoral research associate at the Center for Regional Economic and Social Research at the University of Sheffield in the UK.
It's actually Sheffield Hallam University. Yes.
And your research contributes to impact acceleration, a research that is funded by the England initiative that explores how universities can strengthen their civic mission.
Yes.
And with all this, your research borders on interests like legal pluralism, colonialism, race, and religion, and your work has appeared in peer-reviewed journals such as the Legal Pluralism and Critical Social Analysis, History of Africa, and the Journal of Higher Education Policy and Management.
Yes.
That is quite a significant contribution to the literature out here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And I invited you here because we've been talking about the crisis and the situation that Nigeria is facing. But before we go into this, let us look at what is happening within the general context. President Trump recently designated Nigeria a country of particular concern. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, he imposed a restriction on the visas given to Nigerian citizens for two reasons. The first reason is the North, Boko Haram and all the other terrorist activities are hindering the effective registration of civil status events. And the second is Nigerians have a high visa overstay rate in the United States. What is your reading of the current situation?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me. And I'm really glad that you actually started this conversation with this, particular question. I think this decision that has been made by, President Trump is very, very telling. And I think it's a bit of like a cautionary tale to a lot of Nigerians that are, especially like Nigerian Christians, which I am one of them. I'm a Nigerian Christian, that were very enthusiastic and they were very positive about Trump's potential intervention in the so-called Christian genocide in Nigeria. When Trump made the decision to make the visa application, more complicated, there was no concerted effort by Trump to distinguish between Christian and Muslim Nigerians. It applied to all Nigerians. So when this rhetoric of anti-Muslim and pro-Christian is spewed by Trump and the members of the Republican Party, in the United States, especially people like, Riley Moore, who's the Republican U.S. congressman who was asked by Trump to lead the investigation into violence against Christians in Nigeria. I think we need to be very, very careful as Nigerians, and this applies to Africans in general too, that this white, messianic figure, savior figure that American politicians try to embody, is not really going to work for us. Africans and Nigerians is to fight for themselves. I think the visa, restrictions that has been impeded or put to Nigerians is very discriminatory. We faced very similar issues in the United Kingdom as well. Visa applications are becoming very tough. They're becoming tougher. And these have undertones of racism. Because I would just give United Kingdom, for instance, there's a lot of sentiments against, refugees in the United Kingdom right now. And the images that you see in the press, in the media of the illegal migrant is a black or the brown person or the Muslim person, and not the migrants that come from places like Australia or like United States. They don't even call them migrants. They call them expats. So I think I've diverged a little bit from your question, but I think the answer to give to that is that, first of all, it's very discriminatory. I think singling out particular countries to have this visa bans for. There's countries in the global south, countries in Africa, so-called third world, that are very discriminatory. The second part of my answer is for Nigerians, especially Nigerian Christians, to be very, very careful, when they give support to Trump and Republicans or right-wing politicians, who say that they're going to come to save Christians from this genocide, this so-called genocide that has been levied against Christians and by Muslims.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And your introduction sounds dismissive of what is happening because President Trump and American politicians are designating it as a genocide. Before we go into looking at it as a genocide, are you dismissing the violence in the north of Nigeria now, especially as recounted by the victims themselves?
Thank you once again. So I am not dismissing the violence. I acknowledge that there's a sectarian violence. There's a substantial difference between genocide and religious violence. And I think it's very, very important to speak to this difference. I think is the responsible thing to do. I actually think trying to peddle or trying to push the genocide narrative is more damaging to religious relations in Nigeria. I can't stress how important it is to distinguish this religious or sectarian violence and genocide. And I think this platform is a very good opportunity for me to do this distinction. I have a very lengthy presentation to do in distinguishing between the sectarian violence and genocide. So I don't know if you want me to start because it's quite lengthy.
I would definitely let you do that. In the course of your presentation, I would interject to ask follow-up and clarification questions so that the audience gets to understand what you mean at any particular juncture.
Thank you very much. So before I delve into my presentation, I think it's important to say that I have a legal background. So I did my first and my second degree in law, and a lot of the reasoning that I have into this particular issue, or my approach to this particular issue, rests on my legal background and my my background in history as well. I think when distinguishing between religious violence and genocide, the starting point is to go to the very fundamentals, so the definitions. And for this particular issue, the definition would be international law. And one of the relevant international law instruments is the UN Genocide Convention of 1948, which the International Criminal Court applies. So, a lot of listeners may be familiar with better known genocides in Africa, like the Rwandan genocide. These genocides usually catch the attention of international law. And when they do, the International Criminal Court is the institution that prosecutes the perpetrators of this genocide. So I think it's a very reasonable approach to look at what international law actually says about genocide. Genocide requires, according to the UN Genocide Convention of 1948, genocide applies when there's intent to destroy, in all or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, religious group as such. When this is applied to Nigeria, the accusations of genocide that has been levied by Trump makes reference to religion. So you can say that, okay, this applies to a religious group. But in applying this definition, it's important to know that this intent must be proven alongside at least one of the following acts. So this intent has to be proven alongside one of these following acts. There are 5 acts. The first is killing members of the group. The second is causing serious bodily or mental harm. The third is deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to bring about physical destruction. The fourth is imposing measures intended to prevent birth. And the fifth is forcibly transferring children. Now, this is a very crucial part. For any of these 5 to satisfy the definition, it's important to know that large-scale killing alone is not genocide. Religious identity alone does not establish genocidal intent. Violence must be systematic, must be coordinated, and must be aimed at group discussion. Now, I'm going to go to what is relevant here. Why killings of Christians in Nigeria does not meet this legal threshold that I've just gone through for genocide. While Christians are undeniably victims of serious violence in Nigeria, we've seen some stats and figures that have actually shown that, have proved that. The situation in Nigeria does not meet this international.
Which of the elements?
For several reasons. For several reasons. Yeah. Sorry. No, I'm going to go into it for several reasons. I will go into the reason. There's no evidence of a state policy or coordinated plan to destroy Christians as a group.
Are you saying that the definition you just read out says that the intent must be by the state?
Yes, state. So I'm talking about a state coordinated plan now.
Are you talking about the intent at this point, or about the person who has the intent? Because the definition says there should be an intent to destroy, yes, but the definition does not specify who must have that intent.
Yes. But to the intent has to be coordinated, demonstrable, and coordinated. So I'm speaking about the intent now.
You say
Yes.
the intent must be coordinated and demonstrated.
Yes. I'm speaking about the demonstrable genocidal intent. The violence is perpetrated. I'm not disputing that there's violence. So violence is perpetrated by insurgent groups like Boko Haram, Lakarawa, this Islamic, militant insurgent groups that have shown violence. Criminal gangs and militias, you have criminal gangs and militias in the southern parts of Nigeria and in the northern parts as well. And you have like local actors in communal conflicts. I'm just giving examples of this actors. But these are divergent goals. There's no, when I say coordinated intent, it has to be consistent. Their goals are divergent and they are not picking on group extermination. They are not focusing on particular groups. The killings perpetrated by Boko Haram, for instance, is indiscriminable. Most of the violence of Boko Haram, they are not even Christians. They kill and name every group, regardless of their ethnicity. And that makes it very difficult to satisfy that intent to destroy in all or in part an ethnic group, a nationality, racial group, or religious group. Are you following me?
I'm following you very well.
Yes. So that's just one. I'm still, there's still a long way to go. Make yourself comfortable. There's a long way to go. And so these actors, they have divergent goals.
When you are done with the intent element, let me know because I have a few follow-up questions. Yeah, but I want you to flow to the end.
That's fine. These actors, they have divergent goals. The territory, resources, ransom, kidnappings, political leverage. But when you look at those goals, it's not group extermination. It's not group extermination. I mean, this is a contested issue. Now, I would actually appreciate, if you can get on a platform for me to debate others with contrasting views. I have to acknowledge, as an academic, I have to, of course, acknowledge that my view is contested, and some people have the view that some religious groups have intent to, carry out Sharia, jihad, for instance, and to exterminate, particular group. But that's
question. On the question of organizing a contrasting debate, I'll definitely put that up very soon. I'm happy you're taking up on that. I have other people who have different views from you. If you watched the previous episodes, I'll be happy to bring them on board for us to discuss these issues in an adversarial, put it that way, manner. But talking about the intent, Boko Haram basics, the underlying philosophy on Western education is bad. Christianity is seen in Africa, or Christianity is a Western education. Christianity is based on Western education, and most forms of government that emanate from the West are rooted in Western teachings and Western education, Christianity being one of them. How do you differentiate Boko Haram's notion that Western education is bad from Christianity is bad?
Yes. I think that's a very good question. But then I think you've sort of answered the question by that question itself. So it's an idea, but it's not a group of people. They are against an idea which traverses different ethnicity, different religion. I mean, there are Muslims that subscribe to Western education, and Boko Haram will have a problem exterminating them. But these are Muslims.
Those should be the collateral, if we put it this way, the collateral of Boko Haram implementation of their philosophy. Because religious identity is a protected group under the Geneva definition of genocide carried on by the ICC and the Rome Statute, as you said. So, if any Muslim subscribes to the underlying principles of the Western form of government that is implemented in Nigeria, that person automatically stands against Boko Haram because Boko Haram sees that person as enshrined in Western education and Western government. So Boko Haram wants to destroy that government in order to implement its Western education is bad. Don't you think so?
Yes. I'm going to double down on the previous statements that I made. I think what you've explained can easily fit into sectarian, religious violence, but genocide is a very, very technical and very serious allegation, and the threshold for proving this is very, very complicated. It's very complex.
What is happening in Nigeria now? When does that meet a complicated threshold of the definition of genocide?
So I've explained, the first aspect. The second aspect is when violence is not reciprocal. Yes, when violence is not reciprocal. In Nigeria right now, Christians are victims, but Muslims are also victims. For the most part, Muslims are victims, Christians are victims. Muslim civilians are killed by Boko Haram. Muslim communities are attacked in communal reprisals, and this undermines the one directional and one dimensional genocidal campaign. The violence, the fact that violence is reciprocal and is not one dimensional or one directional, that makes it very difficult to prove genocide. That's another example. Let me give you another example, please. The Nigerian state is not pursuing destruction. I think this is an important, perhaps one of the most difficult aspects of genocide or the threshold to prove. The state is not pursuing group destruction. The Nigerian government is often ineffective or negligent. I mean, you can't have a genocide when the state is negligent and clueless, and it's just pockets of groups like Boko Haram and so on and so forth that are engaging and perpetrating the violence. The Nigerian state is completely clueless. I mean, there's a failure to protect on their part, but there's no intent on the Nigerian state's part to destroy, which is a legal requirement for genocide, for genocidal claims.
We have been looking at the definition of genocide. I want to go back to it. It doesn't say the state. It says the intent to destroy. It doesn't say the state should have that intent to destroy. It says intent to destroy. I understand why you're bringing the state to this, because the state has the responsibility and the obligation to protect citizens and their property from destruction and attacks. I understand that. And you go further to say the state might be negligent, but not complicit. Since the definition of genocide does not require state action, why are you imputing the state intention here?
I make that statement to compare what is happening in Nigeria to what has happened in different jurisdictions. So the genocide that we've seen in different, because one of major thresholds or requirements, I mean, there are requirements and there are thresholds, is that there has to be a state endorsement. And no endorsement, but the state has to be pursuing, has to have knowledge of what is actually happening.
But the state of Nigeria does have knowledge of what is happening. I know you argue that they are negligent but not complicit. How do you make this difference?
No, because I mean, I said they are negligent in terms of their inaction, not knowingly negligence. I'm talking about the cluelessness and their effectiveness.
They are not knowingly negligent. We recently saw the Nigerian government deploy military equipment to go counter a coup d'etat in Benin. Why can they not rapidly deploy such resources to fight Boko Haram in the north?
Yeah, so it's, in fact, I think that's a very good question that actually goes into what I think is the causal factor of a lot of the religious and the ethnic violence going on in Nigeria, which I think is politics. I think is lack of social cohesion. The Nigerian government, they have consistently showed that their primary concern is corruption and to loot, to be nepotistic in their dealings. So I think when their attention is fixated on corruption, I think that makes it very difficult, like we've seen, for them to actually act One thing that there's a very, very good quote that I'm going to use now. And I was reserving that quote for later, but I am going to use it now. So this quote comes from General Sani Abacha, who was the military administrator of Nigeria. And this quote says, any insurgency that lasts more than 24 hours, a government official has a hand in it. This shows how this problem that we have in Nigeria goes to show that the level of corruption and the divided attention that Nigerian leaders have has resulted in the increase in this violence.
Why would you limit it to corruption? How many of these terrorists have been prosecuted by the Nigerian state for terrorism?
Yeah, I don't have the exact figures with me now, but I can tell you that one decision that the government has taken, which many Nigerians are not happy with, is the rehabilitation of terrorists. So there was vast during Buhari's administration, there was a concerted effort to rehabilitate, this terrorist, instead of having a strong fist approach to them, which goes to the quotes I just used. During the military administration in Nigeria in the 90s, the governments were very, very tough on terrorists and religious bandits. They were very, very strong on them. And there's this impression in Nigeria right now that because we have a democratically elected government, that it just makes it very, very difficult to clamp down terrorism.
When Nnamdi Kanu is sentenced to life on grounds of terrorism, and he has never had a gun, that could be a different interpretation on its own of the judgment. But let's look at the bare facts in front of us. And then people who are arrested in the north for terrorism are rehabilitated and released into the society. Is that not government complicity in what is happening in the north of Nigeria?
I think that certainly sends a wrong message. It sends a wrong message to...
Not talking about the message, but talking about what happens. What are the facts? The facts are Nnamdi Kanu was taken away from Kenya into Nigeria and charged with terrorism and sentenced.
He was kidnapped, yes.
While those who are effectively executing terrorist acts in Nigeria are collected, sent into a rehabilitation center under the Operation Safe Corridor, then released into society. Is that not state complicity in what is happening in the north?
I think that's a bit of an oversimplification. Calling it state complicity is an overthink. I mean, I certainly understand what you're saying, but calling it a state complicity is an oversimplification because...
Why would a state try one person or one element or one individual on terrorism, and then the other group of terrorists who were caught arms in hand, killing individuals, rehabilitated and sent back into society?
Let me delve into that issue. So, Nnamdi Kanu's offense is treasonable. And, in most jurisdictions, legal jurisdictions, if not all jurisdictions, treason is one of the most, if not the most grievous offense. Treasonable offenses carry death penalties in most jurisdictions. Nnamdi Kanu was arguing for the breakup of Nigeria. He wanted Biafra to come out of Nigeria. And that was interpreted by the courts that charged him. I certainly don't agree with this, but the courts that charged him interpreted that as a treasonable offense. And they saw the guidelines, they used the guidelines in sentencing him. And like I said, I certainly don't agree with the decision that was made, especially when that is compared to the approach that the government has to terrorist groups like Boko Haram, bandits, kidnappers. And so I don't think it's a good message to send. I think one has to also, the reason I say that is you're sort of simplifying the issue, is that a lot of Nigerian politicians, not even just politicians, but patriotic Nigerians, the three arms of government in Nigeria, legislative, executive, and judiciary, they see Nnamdi Kanu as a treasonable individual, somebody that is arguing for the breakup of Nigeria. And they use that
somebody arguing for the breakup of Nigeria, where individuals will remain intact, full, alive, as more dangerous to the country than people who are actually killing others. We cannot cite all the elements of the killings. We have examples of mass killings since 2009 till today. They are still happening. Why would Nnamdi Kanu be more dangerous to the state than these people who kill every day?
I certainly agree with you. And, even like citing the figures, you're certainly right. According to Amnesty International, over 10,000 people have been killed in attacks in just one region in Nigeria, a region called the Middle Belt, since 2023. So in 2 years, over 10,000 people have been killed in one region. But just to go back to that question, I think we even have to dive deeper into this issue and look at our legal system and where it actually stems from. So a lot of the legal systems that we have in Nigeria and even in Africa in general, they stem from the colonial days. And in the colonial era, prior to the colonialism, the British came to Africa and they brought the Victorian legal codes and legal systems to Africa. And this goes back to treason again. Treason is one of the most significant and the most grievous offenses that one can perform. And this is something that is, I think there's a broader debate or issue, conversation that we can have about this, about how archaic our legal systems and how backward, or archaic, backward is a very, very strong word, but how archaic our legal system can be, from those colonial days where, treason, arguing against the authority of the country, a breakup of Nigeria was seen by the British and by the powers that be, the powerful, the African rulers, leaders that the British handed power over to. It was a very, very serious crime. The anti-colonial figures that were clamoring for independence of Nigeria, a lot of them were sent to prison. Some of them were killed.
I get your point.
We haven't updated our legal system since then to make
your point. And you are making the argument that Mike Arnold made on this platform last week, where he said the colonial rule simply gave the North more powers, and they're exerting that power to implement Sharia and a jihad to overcome to take over the whole country and implement jihad throughout the country. On the theoretical part of it, you sound to be against this argument. But the more you develop your argument, I see you are in agreement with what Mike Arnold said here over last week.
This is my area of research. So I actually watched that podcast. I found it very, very interesting, very fascinating. But I am going to use a word that I've used before on this podcast, which you may not be very happy with. I think it's a bit of an oversimplification. I think theoretically, the British colonial rulers or the colonial masters, whatever you want to call them, they had a preference for northern Nigerian people, for Fulani and Hausa tribe. So the colonization, in fact, the indirect rule system that was used to colonize the entire Nigeria. This is also known as native authority systems. It was developed in northern Nigeria. In fact, this system was used to colonize not just Nigeria, but the entire Africa by a fellow named Frederick Lugard, Lord Lugard. I don't like to call him Lord. I'll call him Frederick Lugard. He was the one who developed this system, and northern Nigeria was used to develop this system. So there was a liking that the British had for northern Nigerians. But things have changed a lot in the space. Nigeria attained its independence in 1960. It's been 65 years since Nigeria attained its independence. I mean, a few years after independence, there was a civil war, which changed a lot of things. So the civil war is 6-7 years after independence. There was a civil war which changed the power dynamics in Nigeria, and it showed the chinks in the armor of northern Nigerians and showed that they were not untouchable. So what led to the civil war was actually the murder of, two of the most influential figures in northern Nigeria, Tafawa Balewa and Amadu Bello. And that just showed that this air of invisibility that the northern Nigerians, or this power that northern Nigerians may have, is only a myth. I mean, it was very right. It wasn't a myth. It was actually, to a certain extent, it was very right during the colonial period. But things have changed since then. Things have changed a lot. Since the beginning of the current republic in 1999, Yoruba people in the southern Nigeria have had power for longer period than northern Nigerians.
Then what explains the fact that since 2000, an estimated of about 13,000 churches in northern Nigeria have been closed or destroyed altogether as a consequence of the Boko Haram insurgency? I'm reading from the report called Nigeria Silent Slaughter by the International Committee on Nigeria.
Yes.
And the northern part of the country still wields all the control and all the power over there. Why isn't the southern power going up there and putting things in order?
In Nigeria right now, we have a southern president. If you look at the government apparatus in Nigeria, if you look at the three arms of government in Nigeria, the legislative, executive, and judiciary, they have majority southerners, Yoruba people. I mean, I'm Yoruba, so I can comfortably say it. It's something I'm not happy with. It's not good for power to be concentrated on one ethnic group. I'm not proud of it that a lot of the ministers, the Supreme Court judges, justices, and in the three arms of government in Nigeria, they are populated by people of my ethnic groups. I'm not a northerner. I mean, the situation that you're describing now is one of those troops, is one of those myths in Nigeria that people are made to believe that the northerners have all the power. That's not true.
Even if the northerners don't have all the power, aren't the northerners the kingmaker, especially when it's being viewed from a religious perspective? Because initially, or since the new republic started, it's always been Christian-Muslim ticket, which generally reflects North-South ticket. But now we have a Muslim ticket and a Muslim ticket and a North-South ticket, which gravitates towards the same source of power, saying that the Muslims from the North have negotiated and identified someone who can execute their will in the South.
Yes. I think that's another good question. But I think something that is probably more interesting and something that is more productive would be to see things not from the lens of ethnic groups or religion, because a lot of the victims of this religious violence and this are people from different groups. There's no discrimination in terms of the victims. And I think the issue is legal and political here. Yes.
Yeah, I want to explore the victims group a little bit. In all conflicts, take the Rwandan genocide, for example, even the Hutus, moderate Hutus or Hutus who stood against the Hutus who wanted to execute the genocide were also killed. And there are always cases of collateral damage in every attack. But when you look at the number of churches that have been attacked directly, they're overwhelming when compared to the mosques that have been attacked. Is that not a problem to you?
Yes, but there's no clear intent. I'm very happy that you gave Rwanda as an example. The Hutu-led states explicitly in Rwanda, they explicitly sought to eliminate Tutsis. And military, police, and media, they worked together. There was a conspiracy. They conspired to work together. Victims who were killed because they were Tutsis. You had in Rwanda, you had 800,000 people killed in a space of 100 days. You don't have that one-dimensional killing in Nigeria. In Nigeria, you have attacks that you have reprisal attacks. There are attacks. I mean, I'm not arguing that there's no attacks against Christians in Nigeria, but the attacks, that sort of sophistication and the coordination that you have in areas where that have been designated as genocidal examples by international law. You don't see that in Nigeria.
You are taking this back to the ingredient of intent in an attack or in a series of attacks
The
that will
central
qualify it
coordination. Yes.
as a genocide. Here again, we have the Boko Haram whose theory is that Western education is bad, and they're attacking churches and Christians foremost, because most of the victims in these areas have been churches and have been Christians. The Muslim would be a collateral damage to some extent. I do recognize that some Muslims have been killed. I do recognize that. And also do recognize that some Muslims have refused to agree with Boko Haram. Are you saying that the intent still is missing in this case?
Yes. No, what I'm saying is that this is religious and sectarian violence. And I'm not trying to diminish.
Does the religious and sectarian violence move over to a genocide? Because attacking a particular and identified group.
Yes. Yeah, wait. I'm not trying to dismiss. I'm being very, very responsible. I'm very careful now in calling something genocide that does not satisfy the requirements of the legal threshold of genocide, which I've been describing it to you. I'm not undermining how brutal and persistent this attacks are, or how the heinous, the brutality of this attack. I'm not questioning that. These attacks can even be classed as crimes against humanity. So there are different levels. Also, there's war crimes when we go to international law again, as prosecuted by the International Criminal Court, ICC. There's crimes that are classed as crimes against humanity. There's genocide. There's war crimes. Genocide is the most severe of all these crimes. What is heinous crime? And for a crime that doesn't satisfy the threshold, the legal threshold of genocide, it's to be very irresponsible for anyone, especially somebody with a legal background, to come and then say this is genocide, because it's not. Calling it genocide dilutes the legal meaning of the term, and it undermines accountability by misdiagnosing the crime. And as I've explained to you, there's not the coordination or the genocide that we've seen in the past, where there's clear intention, central coordination, targeted identity. We don't see that one-dimensional violence in what we have in Nigeria.
I get what you're saying. I hope the viewers are also making sense out of what you're saying, because you are talking to the viewers through me. And
okay, so yes, of course, yes.
To poke into your mind.
I think you're struggling with this intent issue. Maybe I should go through this intent, this issue of intent in the definition.
Then go through it.
Okay, let me go through this issue of intent again. So I think the starting point, if you're trying to see if a case satisfies the legal threshold of genocide, and this is my argument here, is devoid of sentiments and emotions. This is I'm clearly giving a legal argument here. Under the UN Genocide Convention, for genocide to apply, it requires intent to destroy, in all or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. This intent must be proven alongside at least one of the following acts: killing members of a group, causing serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately inflicting conditions calculated to bring about physical destruction, imposing measures intended to prevent birth, forcibly transferring children. Now, this is the crucial part that we have to pay attention to. Crucially, large-scale killing alone is not genocide. Religious identity alone does not establish genocidal intent. Violence must be systematic coordinated and aimed at group destruction. What makes it difficult for the killings of Christians in Nigeria to satisfy this legal threshold is that while Christians are undeniably victims of serious violence in Nigeria, I mean, I'm a Christian, and this is something I follow very, very passionately about. I'm not going to deny that Christians are being killed. Christians are, of course, being killed. But what's happening is crime against humanity. It's not genocide. The situation does not meet the international law's legal definition of genocide for several reasons. The first is there's no demonstrable genocidal intent. You can't argue that there's an intent. There are actors that are killing people, but these actors have divergent goals. I mean, if you stand to be corrected, the goals that they have is not targeted extermination of particular group. This is an issue that I know that is well contested. I'm happy to have a debate about it. Some people will say that Boko Haram, for instance, that their jihad is to exterminate all Christians. I don't believe that is a consistent ideology that Boko Haram have showed, because a lot of the victims have been Muslims. This ideology of Boko Haram itself is like this book is forbidden. Western education is forgiven.
Yeah, since Boko Haram attacks churches and Christians,
they also attack mosques. Mosques have been attacked.
When you look at the number of, when you look at the threshold or the difference,
mosques have also, I think, when you make that point that Boko Haram attack churches, I think it's very responsible to, when you make that statement, to also add to it that mosques have also been attacked. Boko Haram have targeted Muslims. They have killed Muslims. A lot of their vast majority of their victims are Muslims.
Yeah, I understand the point you're making. The question I was asking is this: the proportion of attacks between churches and mosques, I think it could be about 8 to 2, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So, like
I don't have the figures. I don't have the figures with me.
I don't have the figures handy. I have them in a report I was reading, but I don't have it.
I don't have the figures with me right now. Yeah.
But if the intention of Boko Haram is to destroy Western education and the churches are attacked, schools are attacked, that could be inferred as
it's circumstantial. It's circumstantial.
It's circumstantial, but the fundamental and direct definition, or the fundamental and direct intent, is not circumstantial. It is eradicating Christian education, isn't it?
Western education. Yes.
Western education.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah.
In the 2014 article that you wrote, titled Boko Haram, How a Militant Islamist Group Emerged in Nigeria, you say Boko Haram has made it known by way of public announcements, backed by terrorist actions, that its strategy is to undermine Nigerian governmental authority. Boko Haram's video clips, which can be viewed on YouTube, featuring the group's leader, Abubakar Shekau, stress disdain for the Southern-dominated government. Apart from video footage, the Shekau has underlined his anti-government position in official statements. Does this statement by you support the idea that Boko Haram seeks to overthrow the Nigerian government?
Yes. So when I wrote that piece, I think it's important to provide a caveat into that. In fact, that article was actually one of the very first piece of work, research work on Boko Haram, and a lot of the things that were happening then. The knowledge has been updated. We've actually learned a lot more about Boko Haram then. But from the resources and the evidence at my disposal when I was writing this article, suggested that one of the main issues, one of the causal factors to the rise of Boko Haram is the corruption in government. Is government corruption, but they knew the evolution of Boko Haram, yes, was caused by corruption in government. But the members of Boko Haram knew then that it was very, very difficult to overthrow the government. I mean, there have been some issues of, I would call them conspiracy, because there's no evidence, there's no empirical data to back it. But there's been a lot of conspiracy theories that Boko Haram was actually funded by governors for Borno states or northern states, and that Boko Haram is the creation of politicians. I have seen a lot of commentators, make that point. I am still not convinced that is actual fact. But one of the issues that Boko Haram was dealing with from the beginning.
Have you come across a report by the United Arab Emirates that identified some funders of Boko Haram?
Yes, but there have been some people that are saying that Boko Haram was funded by the government, and I will tread very carefully when pushing that narrative, because a lot of the evidence I've seen, they're not convincing that to suggest that Boko Haram was funded by the government. But going back to the question that you asked, Boko Haram was confronted with a very, very difficult task during those evolution years, their years of evolution in the early 2010s and in 2000s, that it was going to be very, very impossible. It was going to be impossible for them to overthrow governments. They wanted a caliphate. They wanted to establish their own Islamic state in northern Nigeria, but they didn't have the resources to do that. There are some local governments where they actually had a lot of powers, where they elsewhere, they control some markets, but these were in small pockets of regions in northern Nigeria. They never really had that the political clout and the resources to have a substantial impact, a political impact in northern Nigeria. But the violence was still very substantive to
Have they changed the objective of having a caliphate?
Yeah, that message is not as strongly pushed. The Boko Haram group itself is very, very weakened now, and the ideology has watered down. I see them as very opportunistic now. Anybody that they think is going to give them money and score like
establishment of Sharia law in certain parts of the north. I equally saw a video recently where somebody in the south was saying that he was dragged to a Sharia court. But what about Boko Haram's intention of establishing Sharia law in Nigeria?
No. The establishment of Sharia law right now, it's Boko Haram is not really pushing. I mean, they're pushing that message, but not as strongly as they were. I think Boko Haram is very much ideologically diluted now compared to what they were when they had the most power in like 2013, 2014, 2015, when they had a leader, Shekau. Since Shekau has been killed, that has affected their power. I would even say that the bandits, the Fulani herdsmen, and that term itself is very contested. Because saying Fulani herdsmen, in Nigeria right now is something that it's very problematic. But just for convenience sake, I'm going to use Fulani herdsmen. I think Fulani herdsmen pose much more damage or trouble to northern Nigeria in terms of the killings and the clout and the power that they have for impunity. They pose much more of a bigger problem than Boko Haram. Boko Haram's influence has been substantially diluted and substantially neutralized. It's been neutralized.
How do you make a difference between Boko Haram bandits and Fulani herdsmen?
I think it's mostly their ideology and their self-identification.
Do the Fulani herdsmen self-identify
so I think
when they're executing or when they're killing anyone?
I think one of the key areas is to look at their areas of influence, their sphere of influence. So violence in Nigeria has different motives. Eastern and the western regions. Attacks are largely carried out by Boko Haram, and these groups, they are very expressive about what they say. In that Boko Haram, to be specific, they say they want to establish an Islamic caliphate and attack whoever opposes that ideology. But in the middle region of Nigeria, we call it Middle Belt, the violence is carried out with different motives. The motive for violence, for the most part, in the middle region is agriculture. So in the Middle Belt, where you have a lot of Christians, who are badly affected by violence between farmers and herders, this Fulani herdsmen, the reason for their own violence is agriculture. They want to move their livestock around from one region to another. Armed Fulani herdsmen have been accused of staging attacks on farming communities that have resulted in mass murders, the burning of homes, bans, and displacements of millions of people. And again, this is not discriminatory against race, ethnicity, or religion. A lot of the victims are Christians, but they are also Muslim victims too. So I think that explains just the different motives that these groups have in terms of perpetrating violence.
I'm looking at the report by the Human Angle Media, in which they say the Fulani herdsmen appear in the barracks in southern Nigeria, but they are riding on bikes, on motorcycles. Do Fulani herdsmen actually ride motorcycles? Or even if there are Fulani herdsmen who are competing for land?
That's a very unfortunate issue. And it's an important question. And there are different ways to answer this question. I think the simplified way is to start to peddle the conspiracy theories that say that a lot of these Fulani herdsmen are funded by the government. I think that's a very lazy and a very simplified explanation to give, that the governments are the ones giving them money and to afford AK-47, and they are used by opposition political figures, political parties, to score cheap political points and to show the incompetency of the government of the day. There's a lot of conspiracy theory that actually follow or peddle that conspiracy. I don't think this is the case. I am yet to find any strong empirical evidence to suggest that this is the case. There's been some good studies, some reports that have actually shown that this Fulani herdsmen gets their money from the money to purchase these weapons from the kidnappings, proceeds of kidnappings. So kidnapping is one of the violent acts that they've adopted to make money. Unfortunately, kidnapping is a very lucrative business in Nigeria now. Unfortunately, one of the most lucrative businesses. And they use the proceeds from those kidnappings.
To the question of where they get the AK-47s from, you see those who say that they are being sponsored by some members of government are peddling conspiracy theories, but you do not advance any point. Why do you call their own views conspiracy theories? Why do you not have an answer to the question?
No, my answer to the question is they use proceeds from kidnappings.
And why do you think your own view is not a conspiracy theory, but the other person's view is a conspiracy theory?
I think it's because I haven't seen any evidence, any empirical evidence to suggest and to link politicians with sponsoring. I mean, there's been some reports saying that that.
Have you not seen the report? Have you not seen the report from the United Arab Emirates saying that these people are sponsored by some people in government and some international actors?
Yes, I've seen that report, but these are isolated cases. Isolated cases. The conspiracy goes as does. Opposition governments are using these groups to show the weaknesses of the government in power, and they're using them to score cheap political points. A lot of this cases or these theories are peddled without showing empirical evidence.
Are you saying that the report by the United Arab Emirates is not
credible enough for you to
No,
see
what
that
exactly?
there are
What
sponsors
exactly
of
did the
these
report say?
actions within Nigeria and without Nigeria?
What exactly did the report say? Did the report say that opposition government is using it to highlight the fragility and the weakness of the government in day?
The report identifies individuals who sponsor terrorist acts in Nigeria.
Yes,
And
but
those are Nigerians and foreigners. And the United States government used some part of this report to sanction individuals. Are you still calling that a conspiracy theory?
I'm not calling that a conspiracy theory. That's not what I
What are you
said.
calling a conspiracy theory then?
I said the people are saying that the government, the opposition government, are using, and when I say opposition government, to be specific, there's Abubakar, is a politician, that's is a former vice president of Nigeria, and is a politician that has been trying to become president for 4, 5, or 6 different occasions. And there is a conspiracy in Nigeria now that says that Atiku Abubakar is the one sponsoring terrorist organization, militant groups to expose the weaknesses of the government of the day. I should have actually been more specific while saying that earlier. This report that you quoted did not cite Atiku Abubakar's name as a sponsor of terrorism. This is a well-known conspiracy, that if you have conversations, some of your viewers that are listening, that are watching from Nigeria, I'm sure they will be very familiar with this conspiracy. Abubakar is using terrorism to score cheap political points and to show that the government of the day are very ineffective.
I think what is at stake here is there is terrorism. Citizens are dying. Citizens are being killed. There is a report by the United Arab Emirates, and the United States itself, based on that report and some of their own evidence, have sanctioned individuals for sponsoring terrorism in Nigeria. Why are you insisting that those who are using this report as a political message are peddling conspiracy theories?
No. You got that. You're putting words in my mouth.
So
we are saying completely different things. We are saying completely different things. This report doesn't make mention of Atiku Abubakar.
Yeah, you mentioned Atiku's name.
Yes.
What did you say about Atiku?
I'm saying that there's people that are peddling conspiracy that terrorism is being pushed and is being sponsored by the main opposition in Nigeria, and there's no empirical evidence to support such. This report that you're showing me doesn't show that. It doesn't show that terrorism is being sponsored by the main opposition in Nigeria. It just shows me that 6 individuals raising funds in the United Arab Emirates to support Nigeria's Boko Haram terrorist group. You don't show me. You're not showing me what I'm saying. It's not showing me that it's Atiku Abubakar that is supporting terrorism.
I am not saying that Atiku Abubakar is supporting terrorism. I am saying that you are saying that people are saying that he is saying that Atiku Abubakar is supporting terrorism in Nigeria. That's what I'm saying. You are saying, but there is evidence that there are people sponsoring terrorism in Nigeria. So overall,
I don't dispute that. I don't dispute that.
So you agree that you agree therefore that the herdsmen might be one of the beneficiaries of the sponsors of terrorism, and they are not necessarily buying their AK-47s from the proceeds of ransoms?
Yes, I haven't disputed that. I need to find more. Probably, as an academic, of course, I need to read more and to find more robust evidence to suggest that. That would be the responsible thing to do as an academic. But I am not disputing that this terrorist has been sponsored by certain individuals. What I am disputing is that these individuals are prominent opposition politicians, which is a conspiracy that has been peddled in Nigeria for a long time.
It could be, but the individuals could be politicians. They switch parties in Nigeria every day. Today they're in the PDP, tomorrow they're in the APC, the next day they're in the Labour Party. That is how it works. So you cannot claim that it's not of this particular party.
Yes, there could be, but I need to find evidence to support that before I totally believe in that.
The evidence, if you want to see the direct financing of, say, somebody giving money to this Fulani herdsman to go and buy AK-47s, do you want to see that kind of evidence? Or circumstantial evidence is enough for you?
I mean, I have a legal background. I mean, it would be irresponsible for me to hold circumstantial evidence, conspiracy theories, beer parlor talk, hearsay, to all that as sacrosanct, especially when the issue is as important and as heavy as this. This issue that we're talking about is very, very heavy. And one of the earlier points that I made in this conversation, and I'm going to make it again, is that this talks of genocide and all this conspiracy theories, even talks of the opposition politician being involved in sponsoring the killings of innocent Nigerians. These are only going to exacerbate and make the situation much worse.
It appears to me that arguments we don't agree with are considered conspiracy theories.
No, of course not. Of course not. I mean, there's the argument of Boko Haram being ideologically grounded on jihad. I don't call that a conspiracy theory. I mean, I welcome a debate with your other commentators on this issue, because it's a contested issue. So that's something I don't call a conspiracy theory, but I hold firm and I stand to be corrected on this issue of opposition support of terrorist group being a sacrosanct fact. I haven't seen any.
Absolutely, we need evidence to support our declarations when they come to public issues, especially issues as sensitive as the killing of human beings. I totally agree with that. So at the beginning of this conversation, hard on President Trump and Americans for taking the stance they took. What do you make of the fact that Congress sent Representative Moore and others to go see for themselves what is happening in the refugee camps? Was that a responsible step?
Yes. It's a very tricky. I personally don't think this problem deserves or is going to make use of Western solution. I think there can be collaboration. I think African problems need African solutions. That doesn't mean that we cannot collaborate with Westerners. I think when this collaboration becomes invasion, I think that's one thing I have a problem with. I think any solution to African problems, and this is not just about the religious and ethnic issues in Nigeria, I think we have to be given the power to dictate how the solution is going to be created and how the solution is going to be operationalized. Any solution, any African solution that is operationalized by Westerners, I don't think it's going to yield any much positive, any results, any positive results. I mean, Riley Moore can lead and sorry.
We are in Africa. We've had this problem since at least 2009. Boko Haram, later on ISWAP, later on Fulani herdsmen, later on bandits in the same zone. We have not taken responsibility for this. The victims have stood up and they have asked for help from outside because there is no help from within. Do you still think that African solutions should be designed by Africans to African problems?
Okay. I think this is a very good question. Discussing pathways for cohesion, religious cohesion, social cohesion. So this is going to be preferring solutions to our problems now. And I think these are African solutions. The first solution, and just a caveat, before I actually discuss this pathways, I'm not saying that it's going to be very easy to operationalize or to implement. I'm certainly not saying that, but it's something that can still be considered to explore. There are two pathways, and the two pathways acknowledge that the problems are political and social cohesion problems rather than religious problems, which I think I've been very clear in my presentation today, that I think these problems are mostly political and social. The first pathway or the first solution is one that is democratic, but I have to say that it's difficult to achieve. And that's the implementation of a new constitution. A constitution that is, so lawyers or legal practitioners, anyone with legal background, they call autochthonous constitution is one that reflects the will of the people. It reflects the culture, the ethnic group, and it's very much grounded on the makeup of the people. The constitution that we have in Nigeria now is not autochthonous. It's an artificial constitution that has the colonial legacies that are painted on it. We need to have a constitution that is autochthonous, and this constitution must establish or must start by acknowledging. This is the first pathway, by the way. This constitution must start by acknowledging that the current constitution that we have in Nigeria, which was created by the military administration in 1999, was not a constitution that went through a democratic process. Many people in Nigeria have argued that this 1999 military constitution, I call it military constitution because that's what it is, it lacked legitimacy because the people were not consulted. When they made this constitution, it was just a bunch of powerful people in Abuja that just sat together and said, this is going to be the new constitution now. And then we're going to have excessive power that is vested on a selective few people. The Nigerian constitution grants substantial executive power to the president. I mean, I stand to be corrected, but I'm sure about this. But Nigerian constitution gives the most power to a president out of all the constitutions in the world. I suspect, and I stand to be corrected, that the Nigerian constitution vests the most power in a president. This is a subject that is ongoing debate and of legal interpretation in Nigeria. We have recent Supreme Court rulings on the president's authority during a state emergency that have has intensified these discussions. In Nigeria right now, a president can declare a state of emergency for no just cause. Section 5 of this Nigerian constitution vests excessive executive power on the president. This power extends to executing and maintaining the constitution and all laws made. This concentration of power has fueled corruption, nepotism, and generally poor governance. I think that we need to have an autochthonous constitution that is inclusive, that will bring everybody on board. Something that is democratically drafted. Nigeria has never had a constitution that is democratically drafted. Something that reflects the will of the people and gives power to the local government. The local government in Nigeria hardly has any power. I mean, I live in the UK now. The most effective way for me to actually change laws in the UK is to go to my councillor. My councillor, for me, is more important than the Prime Minister of the UK, of Great Britain. If I have any issues, I'll write to the council. I can write to the MP, write to the councillors. The local government in Nigeria, it has no power. Hardly has any power. I mean, there are some reserve power that they have, but we have hardly in Nigeria. There's no state police. There is no state. We have one police force which is centralized in Nigeria. There's no state police. There's no local police. So I think when it comes to the pathways to making a change for social cohesion, I think this democratically pathway of having a new constitution is the first. The second, and it may sound very contradictory and very controversial, because the first is democratic, but I think the second is to go back to military rule. And I'm going to give a few examples. I'll make this very short. When Nigeria was colonized, one of the ideas when they were coming out of the Victorian era to the beginning of colonization, there's this concept of benevolent dictatorship. And the benevolent dictatorship is an idea that was very, very influential in the thinking of the colonists. So benevolent dictatorship is very simply put, is a dictatorship that is kind, is benevolent, is one that has been very effective for third world countries. Singapore transformed its economy and its political and social political situation through this benevolent dictatorship. And if we as Nigerians and even Africans in general, if you want a model that is not democratic, because we have to be very truthful with ourselves. Democracy as a system of government, as it started during the Greek Empire, then it went on to the Roman Empire. Most of the Western countries that are democratic, they've had this system for centuries. If we want to have a model for development, I think it's responsible for us to look at former colonies, countries that have gone through similar situation as us, and see what model was used. Benevolent dictatorship was used in Singapore, and it was used through military rule. I know the Nigerian and even Africa in general, relationship with military rule has not been very positive. Actually, things are actually changing now. You look at someone like Traore. You have like young military rulers now that are trying to show some signs of benevolent dictatorship. So I think one model is having this benevolent dictatorship. And I'm going to use one quote, which I used earlier, but I think it's important to repeat this quote now. Nigeria's last substantial military ruler, his name is Sani Abacha. His military rule saw one of the biggest economic transformation in Nigeria. I mean, if you look at a lot of the indices for development, a lot of reports have actually said that Sani Abacha, in terms of economic development, is the best, ruler, leader, that Nigeria has ever had. And he said something about terrorism. And, Sani Abacha is like, I'm not an apologist for Sani Abacha. I am not. I'm totally, certainly not an apologist for him. He has a lot of violations of human rights, even issues that are personal to me. I have family members who were actually jailed in Sani Abacha's regime. But it's still important to look at how things can change from now and looking forward. One of the quotes that Sani Abacha actually is attributed to Sani Abacha during the 90s is that any insurgency or terrorism or terrorist attack that lasts more than 24 hours, the government official must have a hand in it. That quote itself may sound contradictory to a lot of things that I've said in this conversation.
It does sound contradictory. I'm trying to get the trend of thought. How you expect a democratic constitution to lead to the institutionalization of a military dictatorship? I know that people could decide through a constitutional council to get to that point.
No, these two pathways are different. These two solutions are different. So it's either we have a democratic one where we have to change our constitution. I find that to be, it sounds good, and it sounds on the surface, it sounds really good. But looking at the stubbornness and the corruption of our leaders is going to be very, very difficult. A lot of the Nigerian leaders now, unfortunately, they have bad intentions. They are not going to change that constitution because the constitution favors them. So that first solution is one that is going to be very difficult to implement. The second solution, which has no relationship with the first, is the military rule solution. And unfortunately, that would have to come through a coup d'etat. And life will be lost, It's not going to be a responsible thing for me to say, or my partner, that I want there to be a coup d'etat in Nigeria after everything that Nigeria has seen in terms of its military government, military rule, and the violence. It's one that it's a potential solution. It's not going to be good, but it's a potential pathway. It's a pathway. And I say that using examples, previous models that have been used in places like Singapore, that have used benevolent dictatorship to transform their economy. And so these are the two potential pathways. Of course, these are all ideas. Implementing and operationalizing them is a very, very different discussion.
Which of them do you think is feasible in the short run?
I would keep that to myself. I'll leave that to the listeners can decide which they think is what is.
Because in the interim, the problems continue in the north of Nigeria. The United States in August signed a military support deal of about $350 million US. That is to billions of naira. If the United States sees that the money is not going to the rightful ends and decides to come in to save the victims of these attacks, where would your two solutions stand?
I doubt that is that's actually going to happen. I think a lot of the rhetorics that we're seeing coming out of the United States, coming out of Trump, I don't think much of that would transform into actions. I mean, I stand to be corrected, but from what I'm saying right now, I think there's a lot of posturing going on. There's a lot of posturing, and whether that's, I don't think.
Do you think it is posturing, or it is putting pressure on the Nigerian government to take quick actions to resolve the problem, because the problem has been there forever, and Nigerian citizens need solutions?
Yes. No, we do. We certainly need solutions, and it's unfortunate that for us to even be taking this issue serious, that we needed like the Westerners to tell us, or Americans to tell us, this is something that our leaders should be taken serious. But and we've seen indications that Nigerian leaders are taking it serious. But from my own knowledge of Nigerian politicians, Nigerian leaders, there's been so many instances where they've showed enthusiasm for change and for development, and then the enthusiasm is just lost. This is not sustained. But this is something that I'm certainly used to. It's just the priorities are just different. But the priorities of
you
this
see here, Representative Riley Moore is actually saying that they had positive conversations with the government of Nigeria. But a few days later, the Trump administration is imposing visa restrictions on Nigerians based on the same reasons for which he deployed or he requested these members of Congress to go to Nigeria. Does it mean that the Nigerian government is not collaborating? And if they're not collaborating, what is up there for Nigeria?
Yes, I think this goes to the point I previously made. Like, it's just the priorities are different for Nigerian leaders. The priorities is not the security and safety of, unfortunately, the security and safety of the people. The priority is to maximize the profit. Government politics in Nigeria is a profit-making business. It's like a business, and the priorities of politicians is to maximize this profit by looting, strategically placing members of their cabals, their family members in position to loot and to steal money. This government security and governing people, unfortunately, is not a priority. That's why it's going to be very difficult for them to be consistent. I mean, at first we saw that there were indications of them actually taking things serious and collaborating with the Americans.
So, as it stands,
If the United States insists on coming to collaborate with Nigerians to force the Nigerian government's hand to look for a solution to this problem, what would your take be?
I think the solution has to be African-led. So I think there has to be a serious conversations need to be had about what the nature of this collaboration is going to look like. So I think there's got to be equitable partnership, not just a partnership. But
you have just said the Nigerian government doesn't look interested, doesn't seem interested in solving this. And if it becomes equitable, do you think those who are not interested in solving this, as they have not been interested since 2009, do you think at this point they would even move further to resolve the problem?
Yes, I mean, it depends on what the motivation is. I think if the motivation is there, they would have no choice but to be interested.
You are making the point from an African perspective, Pan-Africanist perspective of African-led. If the Africans themselves don't have the motivation and the interest to protect their citizens and their property from destruction and death, do you think they will find any motivation because the United States has offered to help? And generally that help from the US is going to come with money. So the motivation will definitely twist again to money instead of the citizens and their property?
Yes. So I think I'm not, so you said something about having a Pan-Africanist approach. I think this approach or this mindset that I have is not just Pan-Africanist, but I think it's one that is very wary and one that is very cautious of United States or any Western countries helping a third world country. It doesn't have to be one that is in Africa. You know, it can be one in South America, any part of the world. I think any help that is rendered to us has to put equitable partnership as a principle, as a fundamental principle. And like you said, like you rightly said, you know, Nigerian leaders are not really showing a motivation right now. So they're not really showing any interest in taking the help of Americans on board. I think with the right motivation, I think they will start to show that
would be the right motivation.
Unfortunately, and I have to say unfortunately once more, more attacks. You know, it's a sad one, but if there's more attacks, and that would render the situation helpless. And you know, the president of Nigeria right now, you know, there's a re-election is coming in a year and a half. So election is coming in a year and a half, and the EU is going to go for re-election, and he doesn't want to have this security issue as one that is going to undermine his authority or one that is going to weaken his chances of becoming the president again. So that's another motivation. Another motivation is President Tinubu's intention to be re-elected. His intention to be re-elected as the president of Nigeria. And if this conflict, this religious conflict, if it intensifies, Tinubu would have his hands tied and he will have no choice but to seek the help of Americans because he wants to be re-elected. I hope that second motivation is going to be the one that will hold sway and not the first one of more killings.
It looks like the second motivation is actually going to push President Tinubu to look for solutions to this problem. Dr. Femi Owolade, thank you so much for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast. It's been a good conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Do you have any last words for our viewers?
Just happy holidays. Yes, Christmas is coming, and you know, for those who don't celebrate Christmas, happy New Year in advance. Yes, stay safe, spend quality good time with your family, and look after yourself. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a good conversation, and we've noted that you would like to come back in an adversarial format. And we're definitely going to be talking with people who are ready to face you off on this platform. And we hope to have viewers interested in watching. I think I have a good lineup of people already who want to talk.
Good. I'm looking forward to it. That's good.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching this episode of the Beyond Africa podcast with me, your host, Ngalim Bernard. You've heard from Dr. Femi Owolade. He's shared his perspective, which dates quite back to his days as a student up to his time as a research analyst. And his perspectives are grounded in what he calls his research, even though sometimes those research points are contradicted by others. What is important is we must continue talking about the problems of Africa to get African solutions to these problems, wherever the solutions come from. What a time to be alive. What a time to follow African politics. I have been your host, Ngalim Bernard. Thank you so much for watching, liking, subscribing, and leaving comments. See you in our next episode of the Beyond Africa podcast.